And good morning, good morning. Welcome to Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Kim Davis, and it's a different day of the week. Decided that this week warranted doing an extra Chalk Talk because there's just so much going on. And so I'm excited that we could get our very own legal expert, attorney Charles Drayden, to join us today. There's been a lot of news this week in the last 2 days with Brian Flores, formerly of the Miami Dolphins, filing a lawsuit against the National Football League, trying to make it a class action lawsuit. We're going to have Charles Drayden talk to us about what that process is. But I just thought it was important to have somebody who could bring some legal perspective instead of just what I think, from a storytelling perspective or emotionally about the subject. So I'm going to bring in Charles Drayden, who is coming in last minute. He always shows up when we need him. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Excellent. Good morning. How are you, Kim?
I'm good. Thank you for joining me today. So listen, I imagine did you actually read the lawsuit that Brian Flores filed?
I've only read the news reports. I didn't actually read the petition itself, but I got a fairly decent idea about what the allegations were and how far they're trying to go.
So, first of all, were you at all surprised that a coach would file a lawsuit like that against three teams and then naming the league as a whole? Did that surprise you?
Given the culture of the NFL, yes, it's very surprising. It takes a lot of courage to do so.
I watched when I saw the story break on Tuesday afternoon, and then I read quite a bit of the petition, and then I saw him doing interviews on yesterday. I did somebody else's show when he asked me. He goes, "Well, what did you think? What's the story of the lawsuit of like this whole thing for you?" I said, "Well, there's so many stories." But I think the one of the ones that stands out, he talks about, growing up in Brooklyn and that was his dream job. But I think it's important for people to know that he's not suing because he didn't get the job. He's suing because they basically kind of played with him and said, "We already hired somebody, but we know because of this Rooney rule, we got to interview two black people, so we're going to use him to check the box." And when he found that out, he was like, "You know what? My body of work doesn't speak for itself. I got fired from the job in Miami where I had turned this team around. And so this is a systemic problem. And if I don't do something, who will? And if not now, when?" And I feel like for whatever flaws he has, it's a major sacrifice, and it's a huge move that he's taking.
It truly is, and it is one of those sacrifices that the trailblazers that have pushed for equal rights and equal privileges in the United States have had to make. But understand that they usually don't win in terms of when they bring these actions. They don't win because the NFL would find a way to not allow them back to the NFL, and there'll be no place for him to go. But he's doing this because others should have an opportunity to win. And basically, what he's saying is that the Rooney Rule that the NFL created to purportedly increase the number of opportunities for African Americans to become coaches in the NFL is really a sham. And they only do it just, quite frankly, for media attention and for
Yeah.
fan attention. And so they can justify themselves by saying that they're trying to be an equal opportunity employer, which all U.S. employers are required to do.
So, Charles, let me ask you. I know that he's trying to make this, he wants this to be a class action suit. What has to happen? Because you can't just say it's a class action, right? What does it take for it to become a class action?
Well, first of all, you have to have a recognizable class, and he has a recognizable class, but then you have to have a judge certify that class and want to be a part, and the judge has to certify the class in order for it to actually move forward as a class action lawsuit and not just a lawsuit for Coach Flores.
What is that a long process? And what are some of the requirements for it becoming certified as a class?
Some of the requirements are: is this an issue that, quite frankly, is affecting a number of people the same way? And are those people members of a protected class according to federal law? And then is there a group of people that you can readily identify that would be members of the class who want to be a part of this class as well to move this process forward?
So it's going to be interesting to see. I'm sure there are a number of coaches and front office executives in the league right now who would love to be a part of it, but who are currently working, and you just can't. I mean, I don't see that there are any other current coaches who would take a risk, right? Because he's even said it. Like, he's a finalist, they say, for 2 jobs. I think we know, and I think he knows that he's not a finalist for that. I mean, he's a finalist for the Texas job, but that's another talk about a sham. I've talked to an NFL source. He says that Flores knows that job is going to Josh McCown, that he's not getting that job. So he is a finalist for the Saints position. Maybe he gets it, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. But I don't see any other current. I don't see an Eric Bieniemy or Byron Leftwich. You probably have a lot of probable cause signing on to this. So maybe there are coaches who are no longer in the league who would be willing. I know Hugh Jackson has been very vocal, who's now coaching in Grambling. Coaches who don't have anything to lose, I don't expect many people to risk their careers like Flores is, who still have a career in the NFL.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with you. But the thing is about a class action, they don't have to actually sign their names off on the lawsuit to benefit from this particular lawsuit. They can be named in the class. I mean, obviously it's more beneficial if other coaches do want to be a part of the class, but they can be named as a member of the class if they fit the description according to the judge. It depends on how he certified the class.
Oh, wow. Okay. So if the judge certifies a class, then he could name, like he's already mentioned to David Culley in the suit. It doesn't mean that David Culley has said, I'm going to come forward and, be active and testify, but you can be named. Okay. That's interesting. I didn't understand that.
Sure. But I mean, they can also go the other route. Coaches can also say that they're not interested in participating and decertify themselves as a member of the class as well. They have the opportunity to do that. But this is a big issue because this is not just an NFL issue. This is a Title VII issue, and Title VII was enacted in 1964 as a part of the Civil Rights Act to essentially require employers within the United States to not discriminate based upon race, color, class, religion, or sex in terms of employment and employment opportunities. And one of the things that I'm sure that the NFL's counsel has been telling them for many years is that they needed to do something with regard to the decision makers. They certainly have diversity on the football field. They have a lot of African Americans and other people of color on the football field. But in terms of the actual decision makers in the NFL, African Americans have been poorly lacking in that area.
So I'm talking to Charles Drayden. We're talking about this lawsuit that Brian Flores has filed against the Denver Broncos, the Miami Dolphins, the New York Giants, and the National Football League, and just really the conversation about what happens next, how it moves forward. Like I said, I saw him on some interviews on yesterday. In pure NFL arrogance and entitlement fashion, their initial response was, it's nothing to see here. It's people in our buildings. I think the statement said something like, this is the thing that they work hardest on, diversity. Is it? Come on, y'all. That's such an insult. So they come out and I think one of Flores' attorneys said, they spent more time investigating Deflategate than even initially saying, we're going to investigate this. Mm-hmm. This is a big claim. And for you to just say, nothing to see here. I mean, it took the owner of the Dolphins 2 whole days before he came out and said, I'm offended, I have integrity, I wouldn't do it. I don't know if Brian Flores has any, proof that he can share and show. It would be interesting. I just don't know, and I don't know him, but I can't imagine that he goes with this suit and the only really proof he has is that text from Belichick. That's damning, but he's got to have something else, right?
I'm sure he does. And the first thing he has is, quite frankly, are the numbers. I mean, there
Right.
are 32 teams in the league. There's one African American coach, one, and
And he
purportedly,
had to win for 15 years, right?
exactly,
He's a 15-year record of not having a losing season. Is that what it takes for us to get a job and keep it?
correct, correct. And the numbers don't lie. So he has the numbers first of all, and the NFL is going to have to address that particular issue in this lawsuit. I mean, what do the numbers say? And the numbers is not based upon the opinion. You simply don't have representation in the number of coaches in the NFL. The NFL is going to say that, well, we have a lot of assistant coaches. And,
Mm.
well, that's what they're going to claim.
Yeah,
We have
you're
a lot of,
right.
we have a lot of assistant coaches, and they have an opportunity to rise to the level of head coach, and it takes time. Well, how much time and how long have you had diversity even in your assistant coaches? And you have this rule, and this rule that says that you have to at least interview a diversified group of candidates for these positions. Well, is that really working? And the NFL is going to say, well, at least we're trying, and that's all we're required to do. And there's no quota system, so we want to get away from that word. There's no quota system, so as long as we're trying, we meet the standards of the law. Okay, that would be their defense.
Huh. So I know it's a lot, right? But how far reaching do you think? What kind of a difference can a suit like this make? And could this be something that Congress gets involved in? Because they have been involved in some sports things in the past in terms of antitrust, in terms of steroids. Do you expect it's something that Congress would weigh in on? Or what do you think happens next legally?
Mm. Well, here's the thing I think Coach Flores should focus on and his legal team should focus on. I wrote some notes down for myself. The purpose of this lawsuit is really to change the system in order to
Mm-hmm.
allow there to be more diversity in the coaching ranks in the NFL. And the question is, how do you do that? And what his legal team probably should be doing now is offering to work with the NFL and utilize a neutral entity, if you will, to create a system where diversity of decision makers is actually achieved. Get around the rule, actually have a group of people that's separate and apart from the NFL that actually looks at these hiring practices, makes recommendations to them in order to achieve the goal that the NFL purportedly wants to achieve. Change the system.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in order to get that done, Coach Flores is going to have a real serious team about getting that done, not just his legal team, but he needs a
Mm-hmm.
public relations team. He needs a team that is providing information to the public and to the press, through the press, that is going to assist him in making the NFL come to the table to have these conversations seriously. Meaning he's going to have to reveal some things subtly first about what's
Mm-hmm.
going on, what's really going on in the NFL, in order to give the NFL a reason to want to come to the table to negotiate. Other than that, they won't do it.
I think you make a good point. And certainly, hopefully he's thought through that. That I'm sure this wasn't just an emotional decision because he said, he realizes that he could be sacrificing his career. Mark asked, can he show how black coaches get shorter number of years to work versus white coaches? There is a number out there that basically has shown that if you look at since the Rooney Rule was enacted, that white coaches get 25% longer, like basically at least an extra year of coaching than black players do. So that is a number that's real. So yeah, that's something. Those are the kinds of things I guess he would have to be a part of this information that he can present.
Absolutely. I mean, all the numbers are going to be, factors that he's going to produce on his side in terms of showing the disparity of treatment of people of color and others in the NFL. And those numbers won't lie. Those numbers would be in his favor. But again, the NFL is going to counter that by saying that, we just started this process. We need time for this process to work. And this is not just the process. This is not just an issue in the NFL, but this is an issue in the nation. And we're just working
Right.
through, just like everyone else is working through it. And of
I
course,
think. Yeah. Go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, I think that is the excuse that you hear in all of these lawsuits. Okay, that we're going to get there in time. And unfortunately, these lawsuits are not always successful. It takes a very aggressive team for these lawsuits to be successful. And I hope he has an aggressive team available.
So what can success look like, right? Because one of the things he said is wanting to change, the system. And I think we've all wondered, like, how do you do that? Because you don't want to initially you say, oh, I know I did. Throw the Rooney Rule out, but you can't throw it out, right? Because without that, he didn't really have the meat for the lawsuit. It could just be like, well, they didn't hire him, right? But the Rooney Rule does say that you have to, you can't just. It's not about just checking the box. It shouldn't be. So the Rooney Rule needs to exist. But how do you get people to operate in the spirit that it was created for?
Well, let me first say this: the creation of the Rooney Rule was an admission by the NFL that there was an issue in that area.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it is not just the basis for the lawsuit. The basis for the lawsuit is that you are an employer and you're required in the United States of America to not discriminate based upon my race. And when you look at the numbers of the coaches in your league, and you only have one African American coach, that is really kind of prima facie evidence that you discriminate against African American coaches. And the NFL then has to overcome that assumption. But while the rule is designed purportedly to assist in increasing those numbers, it has not achieved that. So what he should propose to the NFL is that you can keep the Rooney Rule, but you need to add some things to it. You need to add some real enforcement to it to encourage the members of the league, the owners, to actually follow through on the goals that you're setting in the Rooney Rule. And we're talking about goals. We're not saying that a specific percentage of the coaches in the NFL have to be African American. We're talking about you giving these coaches an opportunity to become coaches in the NFL. Okay? So we want to make sure that we're clear on that distinction because quotas are illegal.
Right.
Okay. But we can have goals to achieve a certain percentage of coaches in the NFL representing the people of color, and quite frankly, representing people who are on the field for the NFL.
Right. And the number is 70% of the workforce are African American. And that clearly is not what happens. There are more general managers now than there have been in the past, but in terms of head coaches, there really are not. And that's an issue. I think one of the things is, of course, Brian Flores was interviewed by the Houston Texans. My NFL sources tell me that he knows that he was not getting that job. He's listed as a finalist, and his relationship with Nick Caserio and with Jack Easterby from his time with the Patriots. And so I'm sure, he's not just blowing up everything out of respect. He's letting them, do what they're going to do. But the mere fact that Josh McCown, who has no coaching experience. I mean, he was a volunteer coach for his kids' high school, I think, maybe. Wasn't even a coordinator there.
Right.
I think that makes the Texans like a poster child for why you need the Rooney Rule. And the other thing too, and I don't know how you can't really legislate this, but the way the media covers the story. I remember when David Culley was brought in, and there was all of this chatter about he was never a coordinator. There's a reason he's been in the league so many years and he wasn't a coordinator, blah, blah, blah. He never had a shot, right? Anything he done was highly scrutinized. I'm not saying he's the coach to lead the team in the future, but the conversation about Josh is, oh my gosh, I can't believe they hired him. I mean, we don't want to really disparage him because he's a really good guy. Just that whole energy is different. So when they hire him, and they will, he will be criticized somewhat, but not the same as Culley was attacked from day one.
Exactly. And that's by the media and the fans alike.
Right.
That is life. That is life in America when you're a person of color. And one of the things that we try to do is to try to achieve some level of fairness and inequality on the federal level. And you asked previously if Congress would get involved in this particular process. my idea of where the legislature is in Congress right now, given the numbers, no. They got a number of issues that they need to work on that they aren't.
Right, right.
Uh,
Yeah,
they need
yeah.
to have a right to vote.
Yeah, that's true. They kind of got their hands full, or they at least, and we know they struggle doing more than one thing at one time.
But they can't.
So
There are members of Congress, however, that can subtly apply pressure within their jurisdictions, NFL franchises, to say, okay, if you want this, and we're applying federal dollars to assist you in accomplishing this, then if you want those federal dollars, you need to address this. That's how they can affect that.
So, you make a good point because I think about where are the opportunities, right? It always comes down to who has the power, and oftentimes it comes down to money. So, how can communities be more involved? Well, if they're talking about building a new stadium in your city, that's how you can have some that's how you can have some input because
Yes,
none of these owners are building the stadiums with all their own money,
that's
right?
correct.
They're using public funds, and that's where you come in. The public funds say, yeah, we might support the stadium, but you're going to have to do some other things.
Hmm.
So that's going to have to be in terms of leadership and equity at the top.
Yes,
The fact that there are no NFL owners with a majority ownership of the league, basically it's a league that we'll say is like 98% run by white men. I mean, you've got
yes,
Shad in Jacksonville, Janice McNair technically here in Houston,
hmm,
and the rest of them are white men.
right.
and, and they like it that way because
And
what
always
happens
have.
is they have to vote on whether you get to be an owner. There have been ownership groups over the years that had the financial wherewithal. I covered one back in the 90s
Hmm.
that included Walter Payton and Bill Cosby before he had any of the issues he had. And he was Bill
Right,
Cosby that had basically saved NBC.
right.
And they told that group no, not because they weren't financially stable, but because now you don't get to be a part of our club. So I don't know how that changes. I think we've been waiting to see what Jay-Z is going to say or do, and we've heard and seen nothing.
Yeah,
So not that it's all on him, but you know,
yeah.
if you've
Um,
got some influence or access, you need to do something.
yeah, and anytime you have a rule within your industry that 26 members of the industry have to vote to allow you in, that's an exclusive club,
Right,
and the numbers don't lie. That's been an all-white club, and
right,
they liked it that way. And uh, I mean, that's just one of the things that we see in the NFL. And we, the communities, do have a say so in this process. I mean, there are thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people of color who are NFL fans, and they have an opportunity to voice their opinion as well because their dollars
right,
count as well. And I mean, Kim, you know me and how I feel about the NFL,
right,
and
right,
I've
right.
had a long experience with dealing with the NFL, but uh, I'm not spending my money anywhere where I'm not allowed to participate, and I just won't do that. So if the NFL doesn't want to allow people of color to become coaches, become general managers, to own teams, then they don't deserve your money. And a comprehensive effort in that area has an opportunity to have a huge impact on this lawsuit, particularly if it's organized. And if you think about it, the NFL franchises are in major cities. They're in
Yeah.
areas where our communities are. They depend upon your dollars too. So if you want to get involved in this process, if you think that change needs to happen, then we all need to be a part of making that change happen.
I'm talking with attorney Charles Drayden. We're talking about this lawsuit that Brian Flores has filed against three teams: the Broncos, the Giants, and the Dolphins, as well as the National Football League. Charles, one of the things he talked about in the lawsuit was the claim he had that the owner of the Dolphins wanted him to tank games and offered him $100,000 for each game he'd lose, and he refused to do it. How can, I would think that has, yeah, I wondered that. Like, is that a problem for other NFL owners? I don't know, because Hugh Jackson has come out and said the same thing happened to him with Cleveland. The number wasn't as high, but he says he was paid for games he lost when he was with Cleveland. I had to read that a few times, and there was some conversation where there's somebody who says we have proof about that. How big of a problem is that for the NFL? I mean, you talk about gambling, you talk about, you think about it. I've always said players don't tank. And I always said the coaches don't tank, right? Because that's their livelihood. Right. And I'm like, are they asking white coaches to tank? Or are they asking just black coaches who already have a hard time getting a job? I mean, it just brings up so many things that you wonder about. That's got to be a problem.
Yes, that is a potential problem because that's fraud. And anytime you're operating in the public sphere, you have an opportunity to provide a product that the public can count on, that they know what it is. And the public participates in watching the NFL because they believe that this is a competition that, quite frankly, is a real competition. And if it's not, then it's not really what the NFL claims to be. And that can certainly damage the NFL's reputation. And with regard to gamblers, oh my goodness, gamblers certainly would be upset because they're losing money as a result of that. They're essentially throwing.
That goes to the integrity of the game, right?
Yes, it goes directly to the integrity of the game. And matter of fact, I made a list of NFL concerns, and that was at the top of my list. The NFL should be concerned about this lawsuit and the fallout from this lawsuit damaging the image of the league and what I call the league's myth about what it is. Because if they're throwing games and the league is not what it's claimed to be, that product is not what you've been paying
for. Charles, I worked on the Super Bowl, the one for 2004, was a vice president when it was here in Houston, and at all costs, the league is about protecting the shield, right? Everything to protect the shield. I think the claims in this lawsuit, although the league is run by the NFL office, but the owners have all the say and all the control. I think you damage the shield when, like you said, what is it that the shield represents? This level of competition and integrity clearly is being challenged, and we understand that the equity and inclusion is been challenged. One of the things that Flores has going in his favor, or really anybody who talks about the NFL, is they are awful at communication and messaging, although they have tons of resources. And it's because I think they don't care, right? I think it's because of their privilege and their entitlement, which is why their initial response was, nothing to see here. We're doing a great job. Then they had to come back and say, we're going to investigate it. Your first response should never be nothing to see here.
Exactly.
But that's who they are. That's who they are as an entity.
They revealed exactly who they are. And quite frankly, they revealed the reason for the lawsuit. That's who they are. Okay, and they have an attitude of privilege about them, that they can do things how they want to do things. And I'll quote the late Bob McNair: "They don't want the inmates running the house." Because he referred to the players as the inmates, and he wasn't just talking about one group of players.
Right.
We know he was talking about that 70%.
Right. You're right. They don't want that. I think one of the things the NFL really doesn't want is to become more like the NBA, right? Oh, they really don't want that. The NBA is an entirely different league, and it is all. You're right, Lorenzo. It is the owners. On your list of concerns that you made, what are they? Have we addressed them that the NFL should have?
Sure.
Did we miss any?
Well, on my list of concerns that the NFL should have is that, first of all, they're supposed to be an equal opportunity employer, and that's a federal law. And if it's proven that you're not, You're going to have to make some very real changes in order to achieve that, or at least convince people that you changed it to achieve that. And that would change the makeup of the NFL quite a bit if they actually become an equal opportunity employer. And also, the product right now on the NFL myth is that the product is reflective of the nation. And a lawsuit, and depends upon what comes out in this lawsuit, can certainly affect whether or not that is actually accurate. Because I can remember conversations I've had with people before, even when many years ago, I was invited to come to attend a camp in the NFL many years ago, and I chose not to because I talked to the players. I had hung out with the players, and I didn't like the system, and I chose to go to law school instead. So, there's a myth that the NFL is really reflective of the country, but that's a myth. It really is not. But sort of is, because it uses people's talents, but then there's only a certain limit that you can get to. There's a cap.
That reflects the country.
There's a cap. And there's also the myth that billionaires actually care about the communities that their franchises are in.
Yeah.
Not really. No. As you said, public dollars are used for those stadiums. And what are the real benefits that the public is getting other than the entertainment and the pride of saying that my franchise won? What are you getting for that? Okay. And then there are the players who are extremely well compensated. Not all of them. You hear about the ones who are extremely well compensated, but most of them are really not. And then you don't hear about the lingering health issues that those players have once they leave the NFL, and how the NFL has treated those players. They've treated one group of players one way, and they treated African American and other people of color another way in terms of their health. And it was racist, and they were sued for that as well. But we don't talk about those things.
The race norming and the concussion suits and all that goes with that, where they said, well, his brain didn't have quite the same level of activity and strength, or however they put it, so he doesn't qualify for any of this compensation to help with his his medical issues. So there was a race norming. They have historically been bad actors when it comes to race inequity.
Yes, exactly. So that goes against, their image and what they want to achieve. But their concern is that they don't want that to become common knowledge within their fan base, that they're actually doing these things, because that will affect the bottom line. And quite frankly, they're at risk of those things becoming common knowledge, and that can affect the bottom line. Yeah.
So before I let you go, I have to ask your thought. There hasn't been a lot of movement, but there's been some conversation, at least from the plaintiff side and the Deshaun Watson legal stuff. I mean, you've been kind enough to join us and talk about that. Tony Busby has released, as he always does, he's talked about depositions and people that his side is deposed. And I don't, from what I understand, think that Deshaun has been deposed yet. There's been really nothing publicly said from Rusty Hardin, which why should there be? What, in terms of what's happening or what happens next with the case, how long do you think it will take for this case to be resolved? I think the court date is like in February. It's this month, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. Do you expect there to be resolution this month, or can this drag out even longer?
My suspicion is that, and this was my suspicion initially, is that it's going to drag out as long as they possibly can. And Busby's intent was to drag it out, because that helped the Texans deal with Deshaun Watson. Are these allegations true? I have no idea. But I do know that in representing victims of these kinds of incidents, if the allegations are true, the victims want to resolve it as quickly as possible so they can go on with the rest of their lives. Mm. But here you have a counsel whose specific strategy, if you will, is to drag this out as long as they possibly can. And that leads me to question the integrity of these lawsuits.
Talking with Charles Drayden, an attorney, I want to make sure you understand that. And so I've wondered that. And in terms of, the league not doing anything because the league is waiting to see what will happen in terms of any criminal investigation. We are creeping up on a year from these first allegations being made. And I just can't imagine that if there was some criminal investigation that would happen, if there was a criminal indictment that would come forward, that it would not have come forward by now. Am I overstating how the law works?
No, you're not overstating that at all, particularly with the district attorney that we have here in Harris County. If there was the facts justified a criminal indictment, that would have moved forward some time ago. And the fact that it has not is an indication to me that in terms of the criminal justice system, they're saying the facts just aren't there in terms of a crime being committed. So that's only.
So is it is it common that the district attorney would come out and say, we don't see any merits to file charges, or would they just do nothing? How does that work? I can't even remember.
Usually the district attorney tries to stay out of it. In terms of the publicity around the case, the district attorney tries to allow the process work without being involved in it politically or otherwise, or public relations wise. In terms of if we find and they admitted that they conducted an investigation and that is ongoing, and if they find facts that justify bringing charges, then they would. But the fact that they're silent about it and that no charges have been brought, and I presume these plaintiffs have put forth all of their facts to the district attorney, and are still saying that no crime is being committed. I still don't see where we have an opportunity to bring charges against Mr. Watson. That speaks loudly to me that it's just simply is not a criminal element there. And the fact that it's taken so long and that they even had to go to the district attorney to even want that to happen, that sounds like that was a strategy of the civil process, of the civil lawsuit. They hoped there would be criminal charges, and that would provide additional pressure for them to win on the civil side.
Before I let you go, before we wrap up, if you were Deshaun's counsel, or if you had to think what Rusty is doing in terms of preparing him for these depositions or what's next, what would that be? Let me say this one thing. One of the things that's happened, which is not illegal, right? But Deshaun has a girlfriend. They have some lavish entertainment and travel that they share, which I think is probably really not reading the room well, right? Not that he shouldn't live his life, not that you shouldn't travel and do whatever it is that you want to do, but that you have to post it all on Instagram, I don't think is a good communication strategy. But that aside, what is it that you would advise your client to do, or what do you think that Rusty's probably his counsel is advising him about what's going to happen next?
Okay, well, again, this case has some particular issues in it that only involve publicity and not really the merits of the case, because we really haven't gotten to the merits of the case. So my advice to Mr. Watson would be to stay quiet and certainly remove yourself from social media and allow this process to play out by itself. You want the other side to keep talking, because the more they talk, the more mistakes they make. You say nothing. You stay quiet. Okay. Now, I know that's difficult for a high-profile young man like Mr. Watson, but you find a way to do it. And I think that's important to do. But also, I would be advising him that the fact that this process is taking this long is an indication of what the strategy is on the other side. And I want my client to be clear about what the strategy is on the other side. And that would govern how I would proceed as counsel for my client. And I just don't see a strategy on the other side to do anything else other than to bring pressure against Mr. Watson for some unrevealed reason right now, because they said they wanted money, and he's offered settlements, and they still haven't gone away. So then they want something else.
They want something else.
And perhaps what they really want is his career.
Right. What they want is his career. And for people who hear when the other side says that the deposition could take 40 something hours, as you said to me, that's not a lot because there are 22 cases. So a couple of hours for each case would give you that many hours, because there have to each be, he has to be deposed for each one separately, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, but we also have to remember that they probably won't really need that much time, because as we looked at each and every one of those cases, the allegations are these almost the exact same in every case, which is another reason why I question the credibility of this this particular action. I mean, the facts are exactly the same, and you're claiming harassment and impropriety with all of these women, and it was the same thing, and nobody screamed anything, with the first 5 women that don't do this in that industry with Deshaun Watson. That's a little strange to me. But he needs to just stay quiet. Any traveling that he does, just keep it off of social media. And I know that's difficult because he wants to resume his career. He wants to be, a personality within the NFL. But
right
during this time period, he should just be quiet and understand that the other side has a different motivation, and therefore we have to counter that motivation.
I know that one of the teams that he has talked about wanting to go to is Miami. I don't have any access to Deshaun at this point, but I really wonder if that has changed for him at all with all that's come out, right?
Yeah.
If Miami is still the place that you really want to go, because because of the no trade clause, he does get to have input in where he goes. I don't think he imagined that he would sit out an entire season. I certainly don't think he wants to sit out a second season. So I'll be curious to see how all this kind of winds up.
Yeah, I do as well. And it's amazing how all of these dots connect to one another. I mean, what's going on with Deshaun, and then what's going on with the former coach at Miami. And,
right.
What does this mean? What is the NFL doing?
Right.
And, questioning that as well.
I think you make a good point. John Williams said there needs to be African Americans in ownership, right? And we talked about that earlier. NFL needs a whole makeover. And Lorenzo's whole was crazy. What's going on in the NFL is what's going on in the real world, and that's what you said earlier, right?
That's absolutely true. Yes.
Yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate it. I know you probably got some lawyer-like stuff to do, so whenever you can hop on and help us from a legal perspective understand these things, I really appreciate it, especially in light of the Brian Flores suit and just the recent kind of publicity, I won't say activity, in the Deshaun Watson case. Thank you as always. Happy almost birthday to you. I hope you have an amazing time celebrating your birthday tomorrow.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
And as always, we appreciate you on Chalk Talk. Thank you guys for tuning in today. I thought it was important to have some conversation around what's happening with this Brian Flores suit. I'll keep you updated. I think it's going to be interesting. I think you're right, though, Charles. He needs a really good team. That communication piece, he needs a strategy, and he could use a little bit of media training, so that he comes off as he could be disappointed, but we got to avoid that whole angry piece. I appreciate it, and best of luck to him. And I've covered the league for 30 years, so I'm really curious to see how this thing shakes out.
And you started as a child. Yeah.
I started, right, exactly, as a child, a prodigy. So, all right, enjoy the rest of your day. Have a great birthday tomorrow, and I'll see you soon, my friend.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right. All right, everybody. That was Charles Drayden, an attorney here in Houston. who's kind enough to join me from time to time as my very own legal expert to help understand from a legal perspective some of these things. I thought it was important to talk about the class piece of this suit and what it takes and what it means if there's a class action, and also for just a brief update on the Deshaun Watson case, although there's not really one other than depositions are starting to happen. But at least because it's such a story that matters nationally, but especially to those people in Houston, I wanted to have him weigh in on that as well. So make sure that you share the broadcast, put it in your groups. I'll see you next Tuesday, and if there's a need or something happens to do another special Chalk Talk, I will do that. As always, I appreciate you. Remember, get vaccinated if you are not vaccinated yet. Make sure that you are practicing social distancing, that you're wearing your mask. We are not done with this whole virus just yet. So just be smart, be safe, and stay healthy. And remember, do something kind for yourself, do something kind for somebody else. Happy Black History Month. Learn something new every single day. Start this month, but I think that Black history is all year long. But if you haven't been really learning anything new about our history or your history, then I encourage you to do that this month. Have a great week, everybody. I'll see you next Tuesday right here on Chalk Talk.